Hi, I hope you're having a nice summer. I love having extra time to read during these sweltering months, and I feel like summer reading swings two ways. You either have really interesting material that is really educational, but you don't have time to fully read it the rest of the year, or you have marshmallow books. Both of those genres are very important. So starting out with the sweet and fluffy, I got to read the adult sequels to The Princess Diaries and the Mediator series by Meg Cabot. The Mediator and The Princess Diaries, those were the paperbacks that I would bring to the public pool every single day of my middle school summers, and I've read them probably each 6 times over the years. I still give myself an aneurysm when Jessie and Sue's kissed for the first time, so I was very excited. Both books follow up with the protagonist about 5 years after the young adult series ends, so they're in their mid-20s. I think Remembrance did the better job of it. I really like that book. I love the supernatural intrigue. The resolution seemed a little bit rushed, but that might have been because I was reading it so fast. In Royal Wedding, the character development seemed really weird in some spots. Like, Mia Thermopolis seemed a lot more superficial than I remember, but her new little sister, Sophia Grace, is adorable. I don't know how Meg Cabot writes so much. Like, she's written probably 3 books a year since 1994. I know that, like, some young adult authors actually have their pen name, like the surname of their pen name start with CA, just so that their books are next to hers in the young adult section, and people might hypothetically see their books more. So moving on to more educational things, even though the Mediator series was very instructional in banishing ghosts and makeout sessions, I'm going to recommend Shakespeare and YouTube, again by Dr. Stephen O'Neill at the University of Maynooth in Ireland. This is a really great book. It's a series of essays on Shakespeare and YouTube and digital education and classical literature at large, and I'm actually in it. He talks about my condensed Shakespeare. There's a striking variety to the Geeky Blonde's performances, with characters differentiated through vocal modulation, facial and other nonverbal expressions, an extensive wardrobe, especially of hats, and well-paced editing. Yay! So that's neat. Also educational is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is the recommended reading for all incoming UCLA freshmen, so I got a free copy at orientation. This is such an important book. If you don't know the synopsis already, it's written in the form of a letter to his teenage son, and I heard him speak on the New York Public Library podcast, and he has a major background in poetry, and it shows because there's very specific artistic diction in this book, and hearing him talk about how he chose those specific artistic words to describe anti-blackness in America was really enlightening, so I suggest that you listen to the podcast as well. I wrote a book report on this next one for my AP Lit class. It is The End of Days by Jenny Erpenbeck, and you have to read it during the summer or else you will be very depressed. Basically, it follows the hypothetical lives of an unnamed female protagonist and how her personal lifeline would be altered based on what decade and where she died, and through that you see like the whole scope of the century. I didn't know the full summary going into it, and I did not see this bit on any online reviews, but by page 14, some of the characters are using Yiddish terms with really archaic spellings, and you're like, oh god, we're in Austria and it's 1908. I want to read the rest of Erpenbeck's books. The German to English translation held up really well, and I'm sure that it's just as good for her other books, so they all look amazing. Little break to charge the camera battery and the human battery, and coming back with a very different view of Europe throughout the 20th century. How to be Parisian wherever you are. This was suggested to me by a friend who works in a bookshop, and she said that it's really funny if you read it like France isn't heavily romanticized and it's just some random country with a random city. It's a collection of, like, snippet essays, I guess, from these 4 women who I'm sure, like, are all very nice people. It does have very pretty pictures in it, and there are some good recipes, so that's nice. Wrapping up with some poetry, I am boosting the Coiled Serpent anthology once again. I don't care. This is the latest collection from the Chucha Press, which is a Los Angeles publishing house started by Luis J. Rodriguez, who's the current adult poet laureate of Los Angeles. This is the first anthology that I was published in, so there's a poem in here on, like, page 250 or whatever, but there's also hundreds of poets in here, and I feel like this is a really good book for the summer because you can bring it, like, just one thick poetry book with you, and you'll have a new poem to read every single day, and you'll still have poems to read when you come back from your holiday. I'm going to bring it with me to France, probably, because 6 weeks is the longest that I've ever been away from Los Angeles, and I'm going to get very homesick. I also suggest Leaf as summer reading. I have some unassembled copies right here. This is the little poetry booklet series that I run off my Etsy, although I won't be able to ship out any new copies until mid-September when I get back to the States, so maybe it's back to school reading. Fact of the day. But really, today's fact is that Isaac Asimov is the only author to have books published in 9 out of the 10 Dewey Decimal categories. That's all for me. I'm gonna go drink so much coffee. Later, nerds! good posture necessarily, I just have a very flat skull.